My name is Mike Nichols, Nichols. I'm the CEO and president of the Coalition for the Homeless of Houston and Harris County.
So if you could summarize what exactly the coalition does, what would you say?
The coalition is a nonprofit. It's an independent entity that acts as a catalyst for housing people experiencing homelessness. We bring together more than 100 different public and private entities that are involved in homelessness. And we build capacity and build collaboration. We think we're unique because we're highly focused on having a good organization. We're highly focused on being pragmatic and focused on scale, housing a lot of people. We have one focus, which is getting people experiencing homelessness into housing.
And when you say getting into housing, you don't mean just a bed in a shelter, permanent housing.
That's right. It's very important to understand that because there's a lot of misunderstanding. When we say housing, think of it as a three-legged stool. It's a real house, an apartment, a place with a key and a lock and air conditioning and heating and a refrigerator and stove, places where you can live for a long time after you overcome the trauma of being homeless. In addition to that, there's subsidy for the rent to help people move ahead with their lives. And the most important leg, very important, that's often forgotten, is case management, paid professional case management to help people with all the problems that one would have moving from homelessness into a house. Food, health care, mental health care, substance, all those issues that people need to move forward with their lives. But the first step is getting them into this housing with this case management, with this rent subsidy.
So for a person, say, that might be on the streets tonight and they, you know what, I need help, I want help. What is that first step? Do they come to you all first? Do they come to one of your partner organizations? What is that first initial step?
So we're a system. And the system works together with, as I said, more than 100 different entities. And the first step is getting assessed. We have a single assessment tool that can be given by many, many different people in many, many different organizations. One of the important things about Houston is it doesn't matter what door you knock on. You're going to be treated equally and you're going to be treated in a way that moves you forward into housing. Some of the most important things that we did early on in building this system is building a coordinated assessment and saying everybody is going to have this assessment. We're going to look at people and see who is the most vulnerable. So the big decision was made that the most vulnerable people would be housed first. And that means, when I think about vulnerability, it's an assessment tool. But in the bottom line, it's who's most likely to die. Who's most likely to die on the streets? And they are housed first. That was a giant decision because there were people and entities and organizations that said, well, we need to house the people who are going to be most successful. And the community came forward and said, no, we're going to house the most vulnerable first. And the amazing thing about that is more than 85% of those people since 2011 have been successful, meaning they've stayed out of the homeless response system for 2 years. Many of them go on to build full lives with jobs, healthy lives. It's a really important thing that even though you house the most vulnerable first, with that, there's an 85 to 90% success rate.
And those are unbelievable numbers that other cities haven't been able to duplicate.
Well, I would say they're believable because we have the data. We are a data-driven organization. Everybody who goes into the system and expresses that they're homeless goes into the HMIS system. That's a system that every city has. But what we've done differently is our organizations are really committed to having accurate data on these individuals, and we follow up. Where are they? Where are they going? Is their income growing? All the things that you need to look at to see, does it work? I believe other cities can do this too. But again, and we talked to a lot of folks and a lot of big city mayors and middle-sized city mayors, and the first step is really to have a political commitment to, we're going to have a solution, or our solution is going to be housing people. When we chase those little shiny objects around and say, oh, this is quick, they are very expensive solutions. Many people we want to build a town of tiny homes or different things. The object here is we have housing, use the housing that we have, build a system of helping these individuals move into housing with that case management, professional case management, and be focused on that. But the first part is the political commitment that this is how we're going to spend our philanthropic dollars, this is how we're going to spend our government dollars. The second part is to have an organization that really pushes forward with this. I feel good in Houston that we have a nonprofit in the middle. Other cities have these, the lead agency for the continuum of care in government. I think that's more difficult because we can stay focused, we can stay independent of the political pulls of what's wrong with how we're going to fix it today, that we have a little bit longer term focus, and then we can use philanthropic funds more wisely. And we can bring funds in from the city, the county, and the state. When it's located in one government, it becomes that government's problem. And again, you know, in Washington, you're very fortunate. You have a very progressive state with strong Medicaid programs, and this can fund these case managers. I mean, it's a big part, but you need that one organization that drives this forward.
And now I know one thing that you keep mentioning, the Salvation Army, who we just spoke with, also said and reiterated that it's a housing first initiative. What would you say, though, for some cities that lack affordable housing? They lack those options. Is that a huge barrier?
You know, every city we talk to has an issue. We have to only use federal funds because the city and the county have, particularly the city, has revenue caps. And our state is a low service state. Everybody has these issues. I would say that one of the issues, if I was speaking to the mayor of Spokane, is say, be a pro-housing community. Figure out how to build more housing for everybody. How do you get the permitting better? How do you make it where people can build more quickly, more easily? That's important. In Houston, yes, we're fortunate that we're a pro-housing community. We like apartments. We're a pro-apartment community. All of us started by living in apartments. So we like that. There is a complaint in many cities that there's just not enough affordable housing. My answer to that is, if there's housing, you can make that available. In Houston, people said that there was a problem. There wasn't enough affordable housing. There wasn't enough housing, landlords who are willing to work with people who are experiencing homelessness. The smart folks at the Coalition for the Homeless said, we need a landlord engagement team to go out and engage landlords. And when you go to those landlords and say, let me tell you what we have here. Yes, these people may have issues, they may have criminal records, they may have had evictions, but what you're going to get is regular funding to make sure with this rent subsidy, and you're going to get case management. That's not only case management for the individual, but if you as a landlord are having problems, then we'll be there for you. And last, you talk to the landlords and say, you know, we had this 85 to 90% success rate. That's the same success rate you have with the average tenant. So it's really a matter of moving forward, talking to landlords. I think there is often that excuse that there's a lack of affordable housing, but if you look at the rent available through HUD vouchers, it will clearly pay for housing almost anywhere in the country.
And just last question here before I turn it over to Whitney.
As many questions as you want.
Thank you. The interesting thing to me with the Houston model, and several cities all over the country are really looking at Houston as this beacon for really on trying to fix what is a problem in a lot of areas, is the fact that there is this coalition, that there is this mega entity that oversees but also trains and helps connect and bridge the gap. especially you being the leader of this organization, is that something that you found that other cities kind of marvel at or are trying to emulate now? Are there other cities that are trying to emulate the Houston model now?
Absolutely. We even something as big as Los Angeles, the county supervisors there said we want to emulate Houston. But this collaboration is not anything magical. It's just hard work. It is just getting, again, the political will of the elected officials to say, we want this process, and we're willing to take this long-term view. We're not interested in these quick solutions that in the end don't work. That's one. Two is philanthropy. Getting philanthropy all on the same line, saying, work with the system. That's where we're going to have funds available for all of these nonprofits, but you have to work within the system. And that's been part of it. So this alignment in the business community, this is something that is very important. But I want to make sure that folks understand something. It is very, very expensive to leave people outside or to put them in temporary shelters. It is expensive in direct funding, and it's expensive in indirect funding. The use of the emergency room as an ongoing basis, it's always there for people who are living unsheltered. And it's not a surprise, they're in a very vulnerable situation. When we look at that cost of living unsheltered, and we've had a variety of studies on this, the costs range from $40,000 to $80,000 for a person living on the street. Our system, all included, with the case management, with the housing vouchers, with the administration, all of that is about $20,000 per year. So we're talking about a third, a quarter of what it costs to leave somebody on the street. It's fiscally responsible to do that. But it takes work, it takes political will, and it takes the community really committing to this together. And not getting chased off by the shiny balls of how do we move these people outside. Here's the facts. The facts are people experiencing homelessness, most of them are there because of economic reasons. Now, when you see folks in the street, so it's drugs, alcohol, that's an issue that's post being homeless. Once they're part of the community, once they're housed, they're just like everybody else. And they become part of the citizens. We want those folks living in our communities. We want them moving forward with their lives. But the first step is this housing with support services.
And just a quick follow-up on that one. You mentioned a little bit about the buy-in, the community buy-in. What has that been like? Because working with hundreds of different agencies and organizations, getting them all to understand this housing first mission.
It's an ongoing effort, and it's every week, every day, meeting with CEOs, meeting with staff members, talking about this process, solving problems, and telling the truth about this too. When politicians call and say, I see this man on the street corner here, we have to say, we can't solve that problem for you because we're solving it at scale. A lot of organizations want to say we're going to solve problems one person at a time. That's great. But you need an entity that's committed to solving homelessness at scale, bringing these folks in. And once you solve 85% of the problem, and that's where Houston is moving, there are a few hundred people who have such severe mental health problems that it's more difficult. But again, now we will begin looking at those folks. How can we get them the help that they need?
Awesome. I think that was perfect. Whitney, I think I can hand it over to you.
Sometimes we take it for granted. You just assume it's like this everywhere, but it's not.
I'm very excited about